Now, my guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast, and I want to quote what he has said because it is really pertinent if you're a marketer or entrepreneur right now. Now, my guest said most companies waste time and money on marketing that doesn't move the needle. They bounce from trend to trend, get lost in vanity metrics, or never make the time to build a real marketing function. It's overwhelming, it's confusing, and it leaves you feeling stuck. Now, if that sounds like you, then you are now in the right place because my guest on this episode is Redha Alayesh. Now, Red is a data-driven marketer and entrepreneur from Saudi Arabia. He's the founder of multiple ventures focused on helping businesses and organizations grow through smart marketing strategies and innovation. Obviously, things that are really important to do. So Red has helped companies across the region build high impact marketing departments, which is a key focus of his work, and transform their results with data. And I think for those regulars listening to the Neil Wilkins podcast, you'll know how keen I am about data and evidence. So today he's going to be sharing with us practical insights and proven frameworks to help us to take our marketing and ultimately our businesses to the next level. So Red, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hi, I'm excited to be here.
Well, I've given you a big introduction there, but you've said some things there, and these are things that you've been quoted as saying that are really, really important for marketers right now. So many of us in marketing have been swept along by the hype of social media and AI and all these kind of creative things, but you go back to basics, don't you, with marketing?
Yeah, that's kind of like the main thing that I've noticed when I worked with agencies and when I started to work with agencies. They like to do this big things to impress their clients, but then the and fundamentals are kind of like really not established at all. I've seen like campaigns where they spend millions and then some of the basic fundamentals, such as trying to track how many people got from the social media advertising or from an influencer marketing directly to the website, is not even being calculated. So I was like, how do you spend millions on that without even trying to measure the most basic stuff? And I think maybe because Saudi Arabia and like the GCC were new to the digital marketing area and the business, it's kind of a little bit newer to us. But even when I started working globally with some of the companies, I've seen that sometimes they're just like not interested or not accumulated with trying to do the fundamentals of trying to gather the data, which is kind of like what I wanted to do. I thought if I wanted to be a really good marketer, I should start by understanding each channel, how it's done, how what's the basics of it, when is it used, and so on. And then by doing that, I was able to actually grow really fast, much faster than my peers. I was in conversations with directors, executives, talking to marketers, and so on. Even though I've been like 3 years or 2 years of experience, I've sat with people with 20 or 30 years of experience and slowly grow from that. Even to now, I'm building marketing departments with companies with decades of experience, 7 or 8 figures building companies to actually build only the fundamentals of marketing. So it's kind of what you can do just by learning the fundamentals.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? You think in any other discipline than marketing, to be making decisions, to be driving a business forward without the data or the evidence to back up those decisions, it would never happen. You would never find a manufacturing business, for example, creating products where there was no evidence that there was a market for them, or a tech company investing millions in software and platforms and tools just because, well, we'll guess what the answer might be. Well, why do you think that marketing, it's just one of those things where we're happy just to give it a go when it is important, and if you get it wrong, you can be wasting, well, an absolute fortune, can't you?
So I've asked that question a lot throughout like talking, but usually what I've seen is that people have specified budgets going from top to bottom. and then say, okay, we'll spend, for example, $2 million on this campaign to try to achieve this results. We have a number of impressions or views or even sometimes lead or conversions. But then they don't actually track the whole funnel. They don't go through the first steps of awareness, how many people are engaged, how many leads, how many people convert, and try to tackle that thoroughly, seeing which channels do they bring, for example, less impressions but higher conversions in leads or sales. And when I just asked around, it just felt like people are mostly focused on sales directly, or just making something viral, or trying to get building some kind of way that we are great, we can reach so many people and so on. It's just to brag rather than actually driving results. So I've seen kind of those, and I've also seen people who are just like really unfamiliar, who focus, for example, on just creating the best content or the best video that they can. They spend hundreds of thousands on creating super good video, and then they spend nothing on distributing of that video. So I've seen really multiple people. I've seen people who are quite the opposite, actually, who are really good with, for example, creating content and distribution and so on, but they lack on trying the business side, which is usually what influencers are. Um, so that's why they collaborate with businesses and so on to grow the business audience. But like on the flip side, that's what business is mostly. It's where you have a business, you have products, you have sales, but then you lack in certain marketing areas where you want to drive customers, want to drive people into the funnel and helping them throughout your product.
Do you think, when you say that, do you think it's mainly because a lot of marketers, but particularly a lot of businesses, are very focused on the short term? So they're focused on, what are my numbers this month? Or, I'm being set these targets and that has to be my focus. I don't have the time to be looking at the longer term, the strategy here. So I never make the time for it. Do you find it's that people, they might even be aware that this is the right thing to do, but they don't make the time? Because that would be a very easy trap to fall into, wouldn't it?
I've seen people who think like that, who like business owners who try to focus on like short term, we have to hit our numbers this quarter or this month, and then they miss the big picture. Usually, if you want to try to compound your efforts throughout multiple quarters and months and years, then you'd have to build the fundamentals correctly to be able to grow later on and not just at the moment. But actually, marketing, there are quick ways that you can implement that would drive results really quickly. I think mostly it's just about choosing the right methods and channels and trying to understand the customers. It's it's kind of weird because sometimes people just like are not really, it's in their mind but they don't actually implement it. We all know the right things but we don't implement everything because there are so many things. We implement the things that we are most comfortable with, and I think marketing isn't like the most comfortable thing that you could be at. Even sales, for example, you see people who build great products and then not be able to distribute them and sell them, mainly because people who build companies are builders and less of salespeople or marketers people. And I think those are one of the main reasons. It's definitely a main reason that people focus on short term and then they forget the long term. Even in the ways you analyze the data, sometimes you burn your audience to try to drive quick results, and then by, for example, creating discounts or other strategies, and then you don't have really any way to continuously grow in your marketing and business because you just drove the people who are looking for the cheapest price or something similar to that. So choosing the right strategy and finding the right way to grow is essential to your business.
Yeah, and it feels, when you say that, Red, it feels that if I was in another discipline in my business, so I'm not in marketing for a moment, maybe I'm in finance or I'm in production or I'm in customer service, And I listen to the marketing team, and I kind of understand maybe a little bit about what they're telling me. But if I really understood what marketing was, the value that it brings strategically and tactically, if I was educated in marketing, being outside of the marketing team, would that make it easier, do you think, for the marketers to be able to almost sell these data driven decisions into the business? Because what I find with the people I talk to is that outside of marketing, nobody really understands what we do. I mean, I think we understand hopefully what we do, but as soon as you get outside and talk to somebody else, there's almost this misperception of what marketing is. And if they knew what marketing could deliver, do you think they might be then pushing us a lot harder for these data driven pieces of evidence so that they can help to support our decisions too? Do you see what I mean? That if they knew where the
Yeah.
value properly was, then vanity metrics just wouldn't be there, would they?
Yeah, a lot of people focus on vanity metrics and they forget like the actually important metrics that they should be focusing on, or they see marketers focusing on vanity metrics and so on. It's kind of sometimes like I've seen this in the markets in Saudi Arabia more than others because it's digital marketing is very new to us and it's kind of new globally. And when people do things, they might be able to do one thing and then they forget about the other stuff. So they might be good in creating, for example, social media content or social media advertising, and then they like focus less on the whole plan and the customer journey. And that kind of created a bad reputation for marketers sometimes, because I've seen even a lot of agencies and companies where they only do one thing and then they sell it as that's your marketing solution that you need. It's just social media. It's just social media advertising. Whereas there are way more important and more return on investment, for example, like direct marketing, WhatsApp or email or anything like that, would actually drive much better results. So I've seen that, and I've seen people who don't actually see the deep value of marketing, whereas like for example, salespeople would say, okay, what's the point if I know that company or organization would be interested? Then I'll just call them and then try to build a relationship with them. But even building the relationship would be much easier and faster when you already have um, the marketing department established, the brand, and so on. And if you have a large team, maybe that would work better. If it's a small team, you don't have a lot of budget. But as things grow, having a brand would cut time in sales, for example, 20% or 30%. And that accumulatively over like 20 or 50 or 100 salespeople can be huge difference to a business. I've personally seen it where there was company that worked, for example, for almost 3 decades on sales and have done very minimal marketing. When I've worked with them, I've seen huge return on investment on basic stuff like WhatsApp marketing, social media advertising, sometimes even more than 50x. Numbers I haven't seen in my whole life just by starting to implement the basics. So I was mesmerized, kind of like, it's a low hanging fruit by implementing just the basic, the lookalike audiences, for example, trying to create the funnel, calculating the numbers of conversions and so on, having a good website that people actually can see, not just sending PDFs as company profile or other stuff, having something that looks good, even spending like $5,000 or $10,000 to have a good profile and branding would make huge difference on everything else throughout the customer journey. Sometimes it's just like basic stuff, but people, because they can't directly pinpoint something and say, okay, if I spent $10,000 on branding, then I'd get this result. Whereas in sales, I already know if I hired someone like they would bring me, for example, 2 or 3 times return on investment per year or something like that. And I'm not sure why does this keep happening, but I think people are being more educated with time, and now they are more and more interested. I've seen companies even from the start, startups are trying to build, and they're very data driven. Um, I've seen companies who are looking into digitizing every part of their business, even if they are physical products, to be able to cut cost and increase sales and revenue. Because at the end of the day, we've become more digital than non-digital. In Saudi Arabia, people who use the internet is like 99%. Mostly people are young, and across the world, it's just kind of the same. Like ChatGPT gained like 100 million users in the first month, which is crazy when you think about it. The fast growing products ever. That's why people are just like really interested in technology. They want things faster, better, easier, simpler, and that's kind of like by being able to digitize, you'd be able to calculate, drive data, and experiments and do all of these important things to the business. And by doing that, it is kind of like what marketing is all about. It's about understanding, trying to provide more value to the audience or customers, and trying to just bridge the gaps, making things faster, easier, um, drive them like a flywheel, is just like one thing after the other, and so on.
I'm curious with the current work that you're doing. You obviously are doing a lot of work in terms of, as you say, building the marketing teams and marketing departments, and kind of almost sort of increasing that resource to be able to do all the good things that you're describing. Are the decisions that you're seeing businesses making currently on whether or not to create a marketing department or to scale up an existing department and make it bigger, are those data driven? Are those evidence driven? Or are they done just because, oh, well, we can, or oh, well, we should? Are those kind of decisions from the heart, or are they a little bit more logical and data based?
Mostly, I've seen it as just like we need more sales. I've seen people who do it that are afraid of losing the business, or their year was less than last year, for example. They're not growing, they're shrinking, or other stuff. Then they start thinking of marketing. When things start to go wrong, then you go, oh, now we need to build, and that's kind of like most of the main reasons. But I've seen people who are more data driven. They want to grow. They're trying to iterate and improve things and so on. So I've seen both, but mostly for at least SMEs, like when you don't see like multi or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, then they wouldn't really think a lot strategically. It's like usually only a few people who make that decision. Maybe one executive or one of the people on the board are interested in this, and they're thinking of it as an experiment. I've seen people only spend like 0.5% on marketing just to see if this would bring results or not, and then just based on that they would think about it. But mostly what I've seen is just like we're scared, things are going wrong, we have problems, and now marketing is going to fix it, which is not the easiest way to work, but that's kind of like what I've seen mostly. Yeah.
And it isn't the easiest way to work, is it? Because it's almost that, you're almost lost potentially before you start, because without the strategy, without the resources, without the understanding of where the value is going to come, you can't set priorities. You can't really align that resource with the most successful channels. You talked earlier about, making the right channel decisions. How can you do that if it's just, oh, marketing will save us, rather than actually planning it through properly? When you're working with a business, the ones who are eventually the more successful and they're creating this kind of marketing resource, are they the ones who will plan first and then create the resource, or do they create the resource in order to plan? I'm interested to know kind of what you're finding is the best order.
I mean, I've seen people who want to go through deep analysis and planning to make any decision, and I've seen people who make very small. Like I've heard like I've read your post, for example, or I was talking to one of my friends and they mentioned you or anything like that, and then they want to do some kind of experiments. And I find that something in the middle is usually the best, where you don't just find it as well, it's just a small thing and then we won't try it and so on. We don't really care that much about it, or that you're planning and want everything detailed, because a lot of it is experimenting. And even though like you executives are used to, like, for example, 200 pages presentations where you cover every little detail about everything to be able to convince them, that is usually just a presentation. And when you implement things, it's just like, I want to implement, see if blue or red would work better, and then after that I just present that data. So I don't really need a lot of planning. Most of the planning would be in trying to understand the customers. So maybe a couple of customer interviews. Maybe I'd already gather and analyze the current data and so on. But it's kind of common that people would work in tighter budgets, because it's like, you're establishing something new. So it's not like, okay, we'll push everything we have on it. Like you still have to prove that it's valuable to them. So just by usually what I would start with is trying to find the low hanging fruits. So, for example, just by trying to analyze how people currently perform, and the user journey that already exists is a huge step for the executives or the owners that currently run the business, because I've seen most companies don't even know that. So just by telling them, see, I've analyzed this, people come here, then this, do this, people drop here usually. It's a huge percentage. I've compared it to benchmark to other companies or the same industry and so on. I've seen a huge difference here. So this is something that we can work on. Just by doing this analysis, which usually just takes a couple of weeks, it makes a huge difference and impression on them, and they say, oh, now we are more interested to do more, experiment more. After a few months, once you do a lot of experiments, even on smaller budgets, like sometimes experiments only cost like $100 or $50. Like once you have a way to say, okay, now when we spend $100, we would be able to gain 5x or 7x on average. Now let's do a higher budget. Let's do, for example, $1,000 or $5,000 to be able to see it on a larger scale and make sure that these numbers are correct. Then they slowly, since it's very data driven and they're like business driven, if they see results, they would invest more. That's kind of like basic business principle. So sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's just like, oh, we want results now. When you present a strategy, for example, a lot of people hear of SEO, for example. They're not sure what SEO is, but we want to rank on the top when people search for us. Okay, great. That would take 3 to 6 months. Are you all right with that? No, we can't. This is important for us. We have to do it next month. Okay, it would be very costly, not a very good return on investment. If we did this, then we'd have to do it in not the best way and so on. Not sure if it's going to be effective. It might not happen, and then it might take us longer than we expected and so on. And then you have this irrational conversation. But then if you had just a couple of these irrational conversation, the engagement would just break immediately. You'd see that the client isn't looking for to build the departments, just like throwing data, like trying to think about what to do and so on, which happened a few times. Maybe I was like, now it happens less often because I'm doing scorecard marketing and I'm implementing a strategy so people actually try to understand what do they have and what do they don't have. And by analyzing that, it's just like it's much clearer for them whether this is right for me or not. But before I started on engagements, and then it just didn't pan out because people have different expectations that wasn't clear from the beginning. So I guess kind of like it's common to face different kind of problems, I'm assuming, in every kind of service. So yeah.
It's fascinating this because I mean one of the things then that I think you're kind of saying is a bit of a theme here is this almost expectation of marketing, what it is, what it can achieve, and that thing that you described there about how everyone expects immediate results. And I think anybody who's been in marketing, I've been in marketing a long time, but anybody who's been in marketing any time knows that you have to be patient. The result doesn't happen literally as you click on something or as you spend a little piece of budget, because if everybody was doing it, well, not everybody's going to get the result. So therefore, you
Yeah.
have to be better than the competition. You have to be improving. So patience is essential. I wanted to find out from you, though, your perspective on AI and where that's kind of fitting as you're building teams or departments, as you're doing the kinds of activities that you're describing, Red. What is the role that you're seeing so far for AI? Are people expecting to not create such big teams because AI agents are going to be able to produce those outputs? Or is it not really happening yet? And it's kind of one of those future things?
I've seen it's kind of like at the moment it's just opinions. So people who are mostly interested in and believe that technology would like cover most areas of our jobs and our jobs would change, then they would say, okay, we wouldn't want to invest in this. And then there are others who believe that humans still play a huge role in, for example, interactivity and so on, in basic engagements or even in the basic principles as humans are more creative and understanding of others, or even in trying to explain the data or explain things. So it's just kind of different approaches I've seen in the workplace and how people think about AI. I've seen all different stuff. But I think mostly at the moment, because they haven't seen results, they are using AI as an assistant tool rather than trying to replace people directly. There were a couple of stuff that I've seen. For example, I've seen some of the larger companies have people who take summaries, and then when like Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or any of the other tools, you can just like add something that records the meeting and then transcribe it and also provide summaries and so on. It just became less of a role. So there were specific tasks that were less important and now it's not important. But if we're talking about like the whole marketing department and trying to drive customers from knowing about our product to rebuying and advocating for our product, it's just a very long way to go. It might happen like 2 or 3 years, but at the moment there isn't anything like that you can do in one simple tool. You can cut some parts and so on, but you'd slowly realize that if, for example, you use ChatGPT to create articles and blog posts, you'd see the common theme that when since the ChatGPT would give you the article really fast, proofreading it is kind of becoming more and more problematic. I'm sure like people notice on LinkedIn, for example, that a lot of people writing it kind of seems AI-ish and so on, less engaging and other details. You've seen like the content on TikTok or Instagram or other social media where it's very AI and people don't really feel great about it. They sometimes unfollow, disengage, or even report in some cases. So AI helps, but if you're completely dependent on it, you're not even thinking, it's kind of very problematic. AI is a really great assistant at the moment. Maybe it would replace some roles as it replaced some other. But if you can't think about it rationally, trying to figure out, okay, where does this fit? Where can I like um, increase certain areas, decrease some certain areas, then you're not really utilizing in the best way. AI is a tool like any other technology, like social media when it was first created, and there were millions and eventually billions of people. If you misused uh, social media or didn't utilize it well, then it wouldn't bring you good results. Uh, I encourage people to think of it as a tool rather than anything else. It personally, I use a lot of AI to do much better, faster, more efficient, cheaper in trying to experiment, do market research, understand some certain areas, look for resources, even creating content, giving me ideas, editing and proofreading. But if I just completely depended on it, then I know for sure that things would be a lot worse than it currently is. And I've seen a lot of bad examples when people are dependent on AI and then they drive no results. I've done a lot of experiments where I depended on AI completely. Like, um, there were tools that you can subscribe and then they would create reels and publish them directly. And then you'd suddenly, their premise was that you'd gain tens and thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers just by subscribing for like $30. So I thought, okay, why? I'd subscribe to with $30 and see what are the results after 1 month. But really, people were disengaged, not commenting, not viewing. Then um, the algorithm is not even showing my videos in this new account because people are just not engaged. And that's kind of when you are super dependent on it, you can't really get the value. Whereas if it assisted you in creating content, in creating media, in creating videos, and now with the VO3 and so on, you'd be able to, with one person, you'd be able to do 10 times what you previously needed. You'd be able to cut costs and so on. So it's a tool rather than something than anything else. You can think of tractors for farmers before people when they used to gather like fields and plants and so on. It took like 20 or 30 people. Now with one tractor, you can like do the job of like 20 and 30 people. AI does the same thing for most fields, but still without a human driving it, the tractor can go anywhere and mess up your farm. So there has to be someone driving it at the moment. And if no one's driving it, then it's just going to be a whole mess.
I do, yeah, I love the way you described that. I could picture that, and I thought, yeah, this is not going to end well at all without the driver. But yeah, it is true, isn't it? And I think it kind of comes almost full circle, this conversation back round to the fact that if you can find the evidence with the tests that you've been describing, explore, go deep. But actually, I think the one thing that's kind of been coming through from everything that you've described here, Red, and I just want you to sort of tell me if I've read this right, is that it is about taking time to really think about this stuff. It isn't about just jumping straight in. Don't necessarily just recruit. Don't necessarily just use AI. Don't do, big campaigns until you've actually thought about them properly. It's about taking the time out to plan and think and reflect on any of these topics, isn't it? I think that's really what you're trying to tell us.
Exactly, Neil. That's kind of like what you should be thinking about and doing. You do a small experiment, seeing what it drives, and then based on the results, you do things bigger. It's about de-risking things and trying to grow as fast as possible. It's kind of like the basics of what technology and startups are doing, but you can implement that really anywhere, even in much larger companies. So you can think of it as very dynamic. I've seen people who, like, for example, say CMOs are much better at driving analytics. Good CMOs are much better at driving analytics rather than CFOs, for example, because they look at every metric in the customer journey, not just like the revenue and expenses, which is kind of funny because CFOs all they do is look at numbers. But it's true that when you like a marketer role is to look at the whole customer journey and try to figure out what to improve and slowly understand every part of it. And when you don't do that and immediately jump on something, then you're missing the point. Like sometimes it may work, but overdoing it continuously likely means you'd hit a wall or your growth is just not as good.
Thank you so much, Red, for your kind of wisdom and ideas, and a lot of the thinking that you're doing really kind of resonates with the way I've been thinking about marketing, for many, many years. And yeah, it's great to sort of be talking to somebody who, reflects back to me what I thought. I wonder if this is actually the right way of doing it. And you're seeing it because you're doing this and you're using this actually out with clients all day, every day. So that's wonderful to hear. If somebody wants to connect with you and take this conversation forward, or potentially they want to have a little conversation with you about their marketing team or their data, how do they connect with you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. My phone number and like email are actually on Instagram. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. My website, it has like the scorecard marketing where you can analyze the current level of your marketing department to see what to do and improve on it. So feel free to reach out to me either on Instagram. It's kind of like I usually do personal stuff on Instagram, but LinkedIn is very professional, and then my website. I'd be happy to help with anyone, so please feel free to reach out.
Great stuff. Redha Alayesh, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, thanks, Neil.